All right, we are going to be reading The Hero of Third Grade. This is just the first 3 chapters. Chapter 1, Mrs. Hubbard's Cupboard. His life was ruined, and Randall knew what had ruined it. Moving to a new town when school was nearly over, in April no less. What could be worse than that? Going back to his new school a second day. That's what. Where no one liked him, period, exclamation point. He and his mother had moved here to Rushport right after the divorce. Dad stayed back in their old house in their old town, and now Randall had this new school. So here he was getting ready for that second day. Ruined, ruined, ruined. He took as long as he could to get dressed. His mother called every 2 seconds. Randall, hurry. Randall, I want you to have time for breakfast. Randall, honey, hustle. The knots in his stomach didn't leave room for even one Odio anyway. She should know. Before leaving his room, he checked his rubber stamp collection. He slipped one stamp and an ink pad into his jeans pocket. Last night, he had watched an old movie on TV with Mom about a guy called the Scarlet Pimpernel. He had put an idea in his head for how he might use the stamp. The bus ride from their apartment to school was short. Too short. Dragging himself into school, Randall spotted Gordo with 2 of his friends. He saw a boy named Max just ahead of them. Next to himself, Max was the quietest kid in his 3rd grade class, Randall thought. Gordo, on the other hand, could make the teacher, Mrs. Hubbard, pull her hair, Randall guessed already. His name was Gordon, and Mrs. Hubbard called him Gordon, but he wanted the kids to call him Gordo, so they did. Their classroom was known as the Cupboard because of an old Mother Hubbard nursery rhyme. Gordo had bragged yesterday to Randall that he had named it himself. Randall doubted Gordo even knew any nursery rhymes. But right now, Gordo was boring down on Max. Hey, Peanut, he called. Then he bumped into Max, who was half his size. Papers fell to the floor. Aw, math homework, Gordo said. He flapped the paper in his friends' faces. Let me have it, Max said so softly Randall barely heard. Gordo grinned. He wadded up the paper and tossed it over his shoulder. Then he and the others herded Max into the cupboard, laughing. The second they were out of sight, Randall scooped up the crumpled homework. This was his chance. He smoothed it out as flat as he could. Then he stuck it in his folder. He crouched against the hallway wall. Kids streamed by him. No one paid any attention as he wrote a note on a small scrap of paper. Don't worry, I rescued your homework. Then Randall sneaked his stamp and ink pad from his pocket. He carefully pressed a bright red flower onto the note. That's how the Scarlet Pimpernel had signed all his secret notes, an important fact Randall had learned last night. The Scarlet Pimpernel did brave stuff a long time ago, like saving people from having their heads chopped off, only in secret. Nobody knew who the Scarlet Pimpernel really was, but they went wild over him. So cool, Randall thought. Aunt Wanda had sent Randall the stamp with the little roundish flower on it. She had 7 girls. He guessed that was why she chose this one. He hadn't much liked it, but now it was perfect. He folded the note into a small square. Then he walked on into the cupboard, his stomach knots almost gone. At Mrs. Hubbard's desk, Randall added his homework paper and Max's to the pile already started. Now, how to get the note to Max without anyone seeing who it was from? Just then, Gordo shoved past with his homework. He stepped right on Randall's toe, on purpose. Randall bit his lip to keep in a yow, but at the same time, he saw that Max had left his desk. He had gone to sharpen one of his many pencils. Randall forgot his toe and quickly walked by Max's desk. As he did, he passed his hand close over Max's open pencil box and dropped his folded up note right in. Success! A minute later, Max read the note and looked shyly around. Randall could tell Max really wondered who it was from. He grinned inside himself. A pet what? Being a secret hero got Randall through one more day of his first week in a new school. It didn't get him a friend, but he was somebody. He was a Scarlet Pimpernel. Sort of. With his ink pad and flower stamp stored in his desk now, he kept a sharp eye and a keen ear out for other good secret things he could do. That way, Randall didn't think quite so much about how lonely he felt. Mrs. Hubbard, with her smiling round face and blue sky eyes, wasn't old Mrs. Hubbardy at all. Randall had decided by the end of the week. Class, what day is today? She asked. Friday, some kids said. Randall kept quiet. Go out and play ball day, Gordo said. But most of the class answered, choose a tree day. Lots of arms shot into the air. I know what tree I want, several people shouted at once. Mrs. Hubbard held her hand out, palm down, so everyone would get quiet. Now you've all been looking around to find one special tree, one you can get to know very well. It will be your pet tree. Randall could feel his blood pumping. His face was probably going red right that minute. So he really was Scarlet. What tree? What was the teacher talking about? No one would like him if he didn't have a clue about things. He chewed his lip and tried to picture a tree, any tree, around their apartment building. Suddenly, Mrs. Hubbard's voice broke through his haze. She was standing close by. I'm sorry, Randall. I wrote this down on the catch-up notes I sent home with you. But we talked in class about this before you came. Don't worry, there'll be a perfect tree for you. Tell me on Monday. The catch-up papers. Randall knew he hadn't read all of them. But why would he even want a pet tree, he wondered. Everyone sure seemed excited about it, though. He smiled weakly. Yes, ma'am, he choked out. Ma'am! He called her ma'am again, Gordo cried. Snickers spattered the room. Randall could have torn out his tongue. Where he came from, ma'am was just good manners, and somehow it wasn't right to be here. Class, settle, Miss Hubbard said. Now let's go by rows, and I'll write in my book which tree each of you has chosen. Michael wanted a big maple in his front yard. Caitlin chose an apple tree in her backyard. Walker named the huge old tree in the town square park as his choice. Oh no, that's my tree, Tara claimed loudly. Mine too, Dylan cried. Randall watched, bewildered, as the class erupted in shouts. She shouldn't have it. That's the best tree. Which tree? Mrs. Hubbard drew her eyebrows down and said, What have we said about arguing? She looked around at the biggest mouths. Randall was glad he wasn't one of them. Okay, remember the conditions we agreed on for your pet tree? Max, remind us, please. Max said, Everyone gets a different tree, and it has to be close to where you live. Now raise your hand if the biggest tree in the town park is your first choice. Randall noticed that only Walker, Tara, and Dylan wanted that tree. Maybe he should put his hand up, too. He knew Rushport had trees, but no matter how hard he tried, he still couldn't picture a single one where he lived. Back in his old home, there had been that tree he liked to climb, the one with the scratchy bark. But he didn't want to think about that. There was some talk going on now, he realized, about who lived closest to the park. So, Walker, you may have the biggest tree in the town park as your pet tree. You are 3 streets closer than anyone else, Miss Hubbard decided. Okay, we have about 100 trees in our yard, Dylan said. I'll take the biggest one. 100, some kids scoffed. Bet he means 100 stinkweeds in his yard, Gordo said. But Tara let loose a wail that stopped everybody. She was crying. Mrs. Hubbard gave her a chance to calm down. It wasn't until everyone else had named his or her tree, except Randall, of course, that Mrs. Hubbard came back for Tara's choice. With one last huge sniff, Tara said, The tree next door. It sort of hangs over the fence. Not one in your own yard? Miss Hubbard asked gently. Nah, they're all runty. Randall liked the way Tara held her chin high when she said that. She had really wanted the biggest tree, which she'd had to give up, but she wasn't going to settle for a runty tree. He looked around to see that no one was watching him, and then wrote a note to Tara. Keep your chin up. Your tree will be better than the park one, I bet. And signed it with his red flower stamp, the Scarlet Pimpernel. Chapter 3. Who wrote this? At lunch that same day, Randall sat next to Max at the end of a table. It wasn't like anyone invited him. It was just a rule that classes had to sit together. In his old school, they could sit anywhere they wanted. He had sat with his class anyway. Why not? He had lots of friends there. He was about to bite into his PB&J when Tara started poking a little piece of paper in kids' faces. Randall thought he recognized it even from his end seat. His jaw was open and he couldn't take a bite. Look at the note I got. Tara wasn't the type to be ignored, so everyone looked. She read it out loud and then passed it along. Randall was kind of pleased, kind of sick to his stomach. A glob of grape jelly leaked from his sandwich. I get notes all the time, Jenna said smugly. Yeah, but who's it from? Someone asked Tara. It's signed with a red flower. Yeah, a red daisy, Dylan said. Ha! Tara got a note from a daisy, Gordo yelled. You dopes, daisies aren't red, Walker declared. My dad runs a garden nursery and I know. Randall breathed a small sigh of relief. He didn't want to be known as some old daisy of any color. No, I know, said Caitlin. I bet that's a Scarlet Pimpernel. You got a note from the Scarlet Pimpernel. Huh? Everyone said. Randall stuck his elbow in the jelly, but nobody saw. All eyes were still on Caitlin. Caitlin sounded more excited with each word. The Scarlet Pimpernel, like the Broadway play. My aunt lives in New York, and she took me to see it. And the movie was on TV last... What's it mean? Jenna interrupted. The Scarlet whatever. It's a little red flower, Caitlin went on, and this really wonderful romantic guy long ago signed all his secret notes that way. Randall prayed his face didn't show all his feelings. Yes, he was thinking, because Caitlin was so right, and now he could be known by the right name. And then, yikes, romantic. No, brave, daring, and good, not romantic. Ooh, Tara, Gordo said, making googly eyes. Ah, Tara, moaned Jenna. Shush, you two. This note isn't romantic, Tara said. I didn't mean the notes were romantic, Caitlin explained in her teachy way. Just the guy. He helped people in trouble. Randall couldn't stop a little smile from coming, so he finally took a quick bite of sandwich. Who wrote this? Did you? Tara demanded, once more shoving the note at different kids along the table. She even passed it quickly by Randall. He just lowered his head and chewed a little harder. Nobody tried to take credit for the note, so Tara folded it and put it in her pocket. She said, well, I think it's nice. Max was saying something to him, Randall realized. I got one of those notes, Max whispered. Did you? Me? No, Randall stammered. Not yet. About 10 chews later, when he had control again, he asked, what did yours say? As if he didn't already know.